In this video, I will discuss the privacy family of resources. The privacy protocol forms the foundation for a number of other tools, the privacy family of resources. Each remains true to the core concepts of the privacy protocol, and each draws from the protocol to address distinctly different applications. There are a number of members of the family, but ultimately they all draw foundationally from the privacy protocol itself. We start with the privacy protocol. Then there's a high-level screening guide, a green protocol, a large portfolio assessment manual, a catalog of resources, and a First Nations toolkit. Let's start by discussing Privacy Green. The focus of Privacy Green is to provide guidance on assessing climate change, including broader social, economic, environmental systems. We include the value of surrounding ecosystems, and it's a holistic planning approach. The project that we're evaluating is seen to be embedded in a larger system, and we're assessing social and ecological risk. It differs from the privacy protocol because it broadens its scope to include social ecological systems. There's an increased emphasis on risk treatment because it draws heavily on the privacy triple bottom line analysis. There's less description of climate data and information around climate, but there is a greater emphasis on co-benefits. Specifically, Privacy Green includes the development of impact chains, the identification, selection, and normalization of vulnerability indicators, and how to use those vulnerability indicators by aggregating them in the assessment itself. Privacy Green directly maps to the privacy protocol, the same basic 4 steps, and drawing on information included in Privacy Supplemental Procedures document to cover triple bottom line analysis and a potential for an engineering analysis. Privacy Green links vulnerability to risk. So there is a detailed vulnerability analysis section, and we also identify how those vulnerabilities interact to create consequences and how the hazard itself causes an exposure, ultimately all leading to a climate risk. This approach is also used in the Privacy Large Portfolio Assessment Manual. Privacy Green uses impact chain analysis. We identify climate drivers, how those drivers create hazards, and then a pathway between that hazard and the ultimate impact at a location. And it can result in a detailed analysis, as indicated here, looking at a variety of factors that contribute to the impact at a site. Where would you find information on the procedures used in Privacy Green? For vulnerability assessment, you can look at the Privacy Green itself, but also Privacy Protocol Volume 2, the supplemental procedures, and the Portfolio Assessment Manual that uses very similar procedures. For impact chain analysis, we use Privacy Green. Now consider the high-level screening guide. There is a one-to-one mapping between Privacy Protocol and the high-level screening guide. The focus of the high-level screening guide is to provide a more streamlined and less complex assessment process. It allows us to do high-level assessment of climate change risk. It was conceived as an initial screening step before other processes may be used. So we could lead into more detailed climate risk assessment, or we could go on to other risk treatment processes. It differs from the protocol because it's less detailed at each step. There is no performance response analysis. There are no supplemental procedures. It provides a high-level climate analysis that leans on climate trends, so using a technique we call the middle baseline methodology. So we look at direction of climate change as opposed to specific likelihoods. Specifically, this document is smaller and more streamlined than the PIVC protocol. And it includes an expectation that users will find additional information in external resources, like other members of the PIVC family. There is no discussion within the high-level screening guide of foundational or fundamental principles. It goes straight to risk assessment procedures. Now let's consider the Large Portfolio Assessment Manual. Once again, there is a direct mapping between the protocol and the Large Portfolio Assessment Manual. The Large Portfolio Assessment Manual adds a vulnerability assessment process, but you can see that each of the core steps of the protocol are still executed within the Large Portfolio Manual. The focus of this document is large portfolios of assets, and we're screening asset inventories to identify where more detailed work may be required. We identify classes of systems that are prone to failure from climate events. It differs from the protocol in that it provides a detailed analysis of vulnerability, steps to identify archetypes to represent classes of assets, and a focus on systems rather than on single assets. Specifically, it provides a detailed vulnerability analysis, detailed archetype analysis, and different levels of analysis depending on the size and complexity of the systems that are being considered. In this section, I will talk about the PIVC catalog. One of the questions we confront often is, how do I choose the right tool in the PIVC family of resources? We developed the catalog to address that question. The catalog allows us to define our objectives and, based on those objectives, select the appropriate tool from the PIVC family of resources. So the purpose of this is to choose the right tool. The focus of the document is on objective setting. It highlights the concepts that are necessary to establish our objectives, select an assessment method, and then establish follow-up activity. It provides active links to other resources, such as other members of the PIVC family, standards, training programs, and the like. Now consider the First Nations Infrastructure Resilience Toolkit. The purpose of the First Nations Toolkit is to allow First Nation communities to assess vulnerability and identify climate-related risk. It's integrated into long-term planning and asset management, and it maximizes the service level of assets and maintain an improved level of service. There are 3 modules in the First Nations Toolkit: a data structure and sources module, a climate risk assessment that draws from the PIVC protocol, and finally an asset management module. It's intended for use by First Nation communities who are operating on limited budgets and limited resources. In this video, I considered multiple PIVC resources, how each is tailored to specific tasks, how they all draw from the PIVC protocol, and how they can all be used to inform specific features of a PIVC assessment that may not be covered in the current tool that you are using.